Okay, we want to thank Rabbi Nosson Wiggins for preparing some different Torah for us on this Erev Shabbos, Thursday night, Acharei-Mos Kedoshim. Take it away, Rabbi Wiggins.
Okay, thank you. Once again, it's a real pleasure to be speaking for the Gulf Manor Synagogue, and I wanted to congratulate Rabbi Alt and the entire Gulf Manor Synagogue on the launch of their Sefer Torah campaign.
Thank you.
Very exciting news and tremendous milestone in the shul's development. So I wish you guys much hatzlacha.
Amen.
All right, so this week is a double parsha. Again, we have Acharei-Mos and Kedoshim. And like last week, and again in 2 weeks, we have two parshios. So they didn't double my time tonight, even though there are two parshios. So I'll have to try to keep things short. But I actually wanted to discuss a topic which we find mentioned in both parshios. So as far as I know from what I've seen so far, there's only one idea or concept that is mentioned in both parshios, and that is the idea or the mitzvah of arayos. Arayos refers to the forbidden relationships, which right, usually it's close relatives, a mother, a daughter, a sister, an aunt. There's a whole list of them, and in Acharei-Mos, the Torah presents the warning for these forbidden relationships, and then in Kedoshim, right, the second parsha, the Torah presents the onesh, the punishment for these relationships. So there's an interesting point here. The Ramban, he takes note that the Torah is very strict, very harsh about the onesh, the punishment for the arayos. And if we look through the various psukim, so we find that there's death penalty, and there's a punishment of dying childless, and there's being cut off eternally. The soul is cut off eternally. There are a variety of very harsh and strict punishments for one who transgresses any of the forbidden relationships. So the Ramban notes this severity, and he questions why exactly is the Torah so strict. And the Ramban initially explains that that this is connected to the fact that the Torah in both parshios, both by the warning and the punishment, the Torah is very clear that the earth, right, the land, referring to Eretz Yisrael, will spit out, or it'll reject those who are impure in this way. And the Ramban connects the fact that the severity of punishment is clearly tied to the fact that Hashem is going to spit out, or the land will spit out, the people who are acting immorally. And the Ramban he asked the question that Eretz Yisrael we know is a holy place, but the commandment to not engage in these immoralities is what we call a chovas haguf. It is a obligation placed on one's body. It's not a obligation that has to do with the land. So where is the connection between this immorality and the land? One could, in theory, understand that if people don't keep the Shemitah, right, the seventh year, or they don't properly give off the Truma and the Meiser, right, the gifts to the Kohen and the Levi, one could understand why that would cause an exile, or the people would be spit out from the land. But what's the connection between the arayos, the immoral relationships, and this punishment? So the Ramban, obviously, he's a big Kabbalist, and this idea is definitely, a Kabbalistic idea. But just to bring it down a little bit, the Ramban explains to us that Hakadosh Baruch Hu, right, made the entire world, and He runs the entire world. However, there's a very big difference between how Hashem runs the rest of the world versus Eretz Yisrael. And he explains that Eretz Yisrael is not run by is not under the power of any constellation or any angel. It's strictly the inheritance of Hashem. It's God's chosen land, and Hashem is guiding and leading the land every single moment. This is not the case for the rest of the world. Out in Cincinnati, Ohio, obviously Hashem is in charge, but the country and the nation is subjected to an angel, or to it's called a mazel. There are different levels, and this is a Kabbalistic idea, but there are other powers that are governing the country. Each country has their own malach, their own angel, which is appointed to govern that land. So the Ramban uses this concept to explain why immorality would lead to the land spitting out those people. And he says that since Eretz Yisrael is the inheritance of Hashem, it's a very special and holy land. Therefore, if people are gonna contaminate the land and make it tamei and impure, then the land cannot tolerate those people, and that's why they're going to be spit out. So that's the Ramban's idea, and Reb Shimon Schwab has a beautiful addition to this idea. And he, in the beginning, he takes the pasuk in Bereshis, which tells us when God creates man. So it says, "Vayitzer Hashem Elokim es ha'adam afar min ha'adama." So God, he forms, he creates. Adam is man. Afar min ha'adama means dust or dirt from the earth. So we're all familiar with this idea that a person is created from the dust of the earth. But what Rashi points out, quoting the Medrash, is something a little bit more important, which is that he says Rashi has two interpretations of how to explain Afar min ha'adama. In the second interpretation, Rashi tells us Davar Acher, a second explanation, Natal Afro mimakom shenemar bo mizbeach adama tasali. God took from the earth that was in the place in which it says, create for me or make for me an earthen mizbeach, an altar, which obviously refers to the altar which would be in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, which is obviously the holiest place on earth, right? That's the Har Elokim, the mountain of God, the Har Tzion, and that is where Hashem takes the earth, so to speak, and from that dirt of the Har Abayis, the Temple Mount, Hashem creates man. So now we have a picture that man has been created from the dust or the dirt of Eretz Yisrael, and this is this is before the Jewish people existed. This is all of humanity is really created from the dust, the dirt of Har Abayis, of the Temple Mount. So Rav Schwab, he asks a very interesting question. He says that, right, if you scoop up a handful of dirt from your backyard in Cincinnati and you compare that with all these different testing and whatnot with a scoop of dirt from Yerushalayim or Tel Aviv or Haifa or Netanya or Tiberia, any city in Eretz Yisrael, there's no difference. The earth is the earth, dirt is dirt. So what is we understand that Eretz Yisrael is special, but what is the idea? How is the earth different? It seems to be the same plain old dirt. And he really adds on to this that we find there are numerous references throughout the Talmud and the Midrashim and even the Psukim, the verses throughout the Navi and the Ksuvim. There are various references to the fact that Chutz La'aretz, which we live in now due to the fact that we're in Galus, we're in exile, but Chutz La'aretz is not a fun place to be. First of all, we have the Gemara, the passage of the Talmud, which tells us that Kol Hadar Be'eretz Yisrael, whoever lives in Israel, Domeh K'mi Sheyesh Lo Eloka. It's as if he has a God. Whoever dwells outside of Israel, it's as if he has no God. And the Gemara quotes a verse in the Parshas Bahar, and we find likewise by David HaMelech when he's forced to flee Eretz Yisrael because his son Avshalom is pursuing him to kill him. A very horrific story. So again, David complains and he bemoans the fact that he's been forced to leave the Holy Land. And there's even a reference in the Gemara in Ksubis, which tells us that one who is in Eretz Yisrael, it's as if he worships idol worship. He worships idols, which sounds, quite odd and quite strange. So what exactly so these are all examples or proofs that Eretz Yisrael is special. and that one who lives in Chutz La'aretz is missing something. But again, as Rav Schwab asked, right, the earth seems to be all the same. You know, a scoop of dirt over here and a scoop of dirt from Yerushalayim it's all the same dirt. So where lies the difference? So Rav Schwab gives a beautiful mashal to explain this distinction, and he says, if we would examine the human body, so we find that there is, right, there's the flesh and there's the bones, the tissue, the sinews, right? That's what the human body is built out of. If we go ahead and look at the brain, right, you pull the brain out of the human body and you look at it at face value, it's the same flesh and tissue and whatnot. It looks the same. However, if we think for a moment, we'll realize that the brain, right, is the center of everything, right? The koach of seichel, the ability to comprehend, the intellect, even the vision and the hearing and every sense, right? The command center is the brain for all those senses. And therefore, even though, right, externally the brain seems to be produced or created out of the same flesh and tissue as the rest of the body, but it's quite clear to anybody and everybody that the brain is the epicenter and it's the power, it's the engine of the body. So Reb Schwab uses this mashal, this example, to explain the dirt of Eretz Yisrael versus the dirt and the earth of the rest of the world. He says, of course, externally the dirt's the same dirt, but there's a very special spiritual power to the dirt of Eretz Yisrael. And Eretz Yisrael represents, metaphorically, it's like the brain of the human body. Just as the brain is the driving power and source which propels the body to do everything. Every action is flows from the brain's command. Likewise, Eretz Yisrael is the source of and it's the power and it's the spiritual force of the entire universe, the entire world. And that's the specialness in the dirt of Eretz Yisrael. So again, we've said that essentially this is the uniqueness of Eretz Yisrael, and that's why the dirt is holy. Just to end off in the last couple of moments here, so we have a fascinating Rashi, which I'd like to share with you. Rashi in Maseches Rosh Hashanah.
Rabbi Wiggins, before you move on to Rashi, can I just interrupt you for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious about this, like the bottom line idea here from Rav Schwab is, I like the metaphor of the brain, I think is brilliant, but what is he essentially just answering the question with that's the way it is? Meaning we may not be able to see the difference, but it's there, and the bigger it sounds to me like that's what's being said, unless I missed something.
So. I think you're correct.
Okay. The other thing that I'm wondering is that example that you gave of like digging up a shovel of dirt in your backyard in Cincinnati versus Tveria or whatever it is that true? Meaning, is the Kedusha, if you will, in the dirt? Like if I were to remove the dirt from Eretz Yisrael, is there something special to that? Does that dirt retain any specialness?
So that question will be answered in this Rashi.
Oh, this next point? Okay.
Yeah,
I was about to say one interesting, I don't know, source is maybe the wrong word, but there definitely seems to be something, at a Tahara, they use offer specifically from Eretz Yisrael, they use dirt from Israel to put on the dead body in certain places.
Okay.
And that certainly would imply that even though we're not in the land of Israel per se.
Definitely be in sync with what I'm about to say here.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let's hear this Rashi.
So Rashi in Rosh Hashanah on Daf Chaf Dalet Amud Beis, that's 24b. Rashi tells us as follows. The Gemara is talking about a certain synagogue, a Beis HaKnesses, which existed in Bavel in Babylonia, which is in modern day Iraq. And Rashi tells us that the synagogue was called Shaf v'Yasiv. That was the name of the synagogue. And in the second interpretation, Rashi tells us as follows: the Tamid Haisa Shchina Mitzuya Sham. The the Shechina, the divine presence, was always found in this synagogue. Now, this synagogue is in Chutz La'aretz. This synagogue is not in Eretz Yisrael, it's in Bavel, it's in Iraq. But the Shechina was always found there. The Yechanya v'Galuso, Yechanya, who was one of the last kings of Judea before the first temple's destruction, and he was exiled 11 years prior to the actual destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Yechanya v'Galuso, Yechanya and those exiled with him, which were primarily the rabbis and the Torah scholars of the generation, these people, they built this synagogue. Okay, shenasu imahem me'avne Yerushalayim. They took with them stones of Yerushalayim. V'aleim nemar, on them it says, ki ratzu avadechas avaneha. Your servants have desired or wanted its stones. So we see here a fantastic and phenomenal idea that not only is the dirt and the earth and the stones come from the earth. Not only is that holy and kadosh in Eretz Yisrael, but the Shechina was able to be transported and housed in a synagogue outside of Eretz Yisrael because it was laid on a foundation of stones that came from Yerushalayim. Wow. So this just goes to show you, I think it will answer your question, Rabbi Alt, that the stones, I would say have kedusha. In fact, we were living in Eretz Yisrael for the last 6.5 years, and my wife had an idea to bring back a couple of stones, and they're actually framed in my dining room. I can show them to you. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, wow. But, right there on the wall.
Those are 3 stones from Yerushalayim, which are in our house. So I hope it'll be a source of kedusha for the whole city.
It'll be Shaf Yosef apartments.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Something like that. I hear that. Wow. Rabbi Horowitz is commenting here in the chat that lots of shuls these days have Jerusalem stones built into them.
Yes, that's definitely.
One of the shuls. Dr. Horowitz, my question is: do those stones come from Israel, or do they just cut them and do they use the style that's Jerusalem stone style? That's always been my question. So yeah, I think we might have to. Oh, they're you believe that they're quarried there? Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so there you have it.
You got to get some at the Golf Manor Synagogue.
That's right. Now the question is, Rashi in Sanhedrin says it was the foundation specifically.
Rosh Hashanah, it is.
Rosh Hashanah, excuse me, I said that already. I said that by accident.
Yes, okay.
Chav Daladam and Beis, you said, right?
Chav Daladam. He doesn't say the word foundation, but I would assume that they didn't bring enough stones to build the entire synagogue, entire shul. It was perhaps, I don't know. I'm not sure.
What is Rashi's lashon? How does he say it?
He says, "Tamid haisa shchina mitzuya sham v'yechanya v'galusa b'na'uhu shenasu imahem me'avne Yerushalayim." It's not clear if that was for the entire structure.
Just as they brought stones with them and they built it. So perhaps that was the entire structure. Perhaps that was a tiny fraction of the structure.
Right.
Fascinating. Okay, I think we're going to have to incorporate this into into our next capital campaign.
All right. Yes.
Jerusalem stones. Fascinating. Wow. Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and joining.
Yes. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Rabbi Wiggins, as always. And I wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos.
Have a great Shabbos.
Okay. Good Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi Wiggins.